The man who murdered me was smiling, not because he got away with it, not because the police never found my body, but because he had everything he ever wanted: a beautiful wife, 2 perfect children, a luxurious mansion, a respected reputation, and a community that called him a hero. Meanwhile, I was dead, or at least, I was supposed to be, because 3 months after my murder, I opened my eyes again, not in heaven, not in hell, but in the bedroom of a little girl, and when I looked into the mirror, I realized something horrifying. The man who killed me was now my stepfather, and this time I wasn't running from him. I was going to destroy everything he loved. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because this story gets darker than you can imagine. Now let's begin. My name used to be Sophia Bennett. I was 26 years old. I worked as an investigative journalist. Most people thought my life was exciting. In reality, it was exhausting. Long hours, dangerous stories, endless threats, but I loved uncovering secrets. Especially the secrets powerful people wanted buried, and that was exactly how I met Victor Hale. At the time, Victor was a rising businessman, handsome, charismatic, generous, the kind of man everyone trusted instantly. He donated to charities, sponsored community events, helped struggling families. The city practically worshipped him, but my investigation uncovered something different, something ugly, something terrifying. Victor wasn't a philanthropist, he was a criminal. Money laundering, fraud, blackmail, extortion. He had built an empire on lies, and I had proof, enough proof to destroy him forever. I remember sitting in my apartment that night, the evidence spread across my desk: photos, documents, bank records, witness statements. I finally had everything. All I needed to do was publish. Then my phone rang. I shouldn't have answered, but I did, and that's when I heard his voice. "Miss Bennett." The moment I heard those words, my blood turned cold. Victor, somehow, he knew. He knew what I had discovered. He knew where I lived, and worst of all, he sounded calm, almost amused. "You've been very busy." I immediately reached for my pepper spray. "Stay away from me." He laughed softly, a sound I would never forget. "I'm afraid it's too late for that." Then the call ended. 5 minutes later, someone knocked on my door, and my life changed forever. I don't remember every detail. Trauma has a way of blurring memories, but some things remain crystal clear: the fear, the panic, the realization. Victor wasn't sending someone else, he came himself. I remember backing away, trying to escape, trying to fight, trying to survive, but he was stronger, smarter, prepared, and in the end, the last thing I saw was his face, not angry, not emotional, just cold, like I wasn't even a person, like I was a problem, a loose end, something that needed to disappear. Then everything went dark, forever, or so I thought. At first, there was nothing. No pain, no fear, no memories, just darkness. Then suddenly, voices, muffled voices, a woman's crying, a man's laughter, bright lights. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I couldn't understand what was happening. Then I heard someone say, "Congratulations, it's a girl." A girl? What did that mean? Why couldn't I speak? Why was everything blurry? Why did my body feel so small? And then reality hit me. I wasn't dead. I had been born. Again. I had somehow been reincarnated. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part came 7 years later. The day my mother remarried. The day I met my new stepfather. The day I looked up at his face and recognized him instantly. Victor Hale. My killer. The man who murdered me. Standing in our living room. Smiling. Holding flowers. Pretending to be a good man. And he had absolutely no idea who I was. I wanted to scream. I wanted to expose him. I wanted to tell everyone. But I couldn't. Who would believe a child claiming she remembered a past life? No one. So I stayed silent, and I watched. That became my greatest weapon: observation, patience, control. Over the next several months, I learned everything. Victor had completely reinvented himself. His old crimes had vanished, witnesses disappeared, evidence destroyed, investigations closed. The city now viewed him as a success story, a redeemed man, a family man, a role model. He was married to my mother Amelia, a kind woman who adored him. He had 2 biological children, Ethan, age 15, and Lily, age 13. To the outside world, they were perfect, the perfect family, the perfect home, the perfect life. But perfection is always a lie, and I knew exactly how to find the cracks. Children have a secret power. Adults underestimate them. They think children don't notice things. They think children don't understand. They think children forget. Victor made the same mistake. To him, I was harmless. An innocent little girl, nothing more. He never noticed me paying attention, never noticed me listening, never noticed me collecting information, every dinner conversation, every phone call, every late night argument, every suspicious meeting. I watched everything, and slowly, the mask began to slip. Because monsters never stop being monsters, they simply learn how to hide better. One night, I woke up thirsty. The house was quiet, everyone was asleep, or so I thought. As I walked downstairs, I noticed light coming from Victor's office. The door was slightly open. Inside, Victor was speaking on the phone, and for the first time, I heard the voice I remembered from my death, cold, threatening, cruel. Gone was the loving husband, gone was the caring father. This was the real Victor, the man beneath the mask, the man who murdered me. And as I listened from the shadows, I realized something. Victor hadn't changed, not at all. He was still hiding dangerous secrets, and this time, I was going to uncover every single one. I thought infiltrating my killer's family would be difficult. I was wrong. Getting inside was easy. Staying alive, once I discovered what he was hiding, that was the real challenge, because Victor Hale wasn't just protecting his reputation, he was protecting something much bigger, something worth killing for. And soon, he would realize someone inside his own house was coming for him. Revenge isn't won with anger, it's won with information. That was the first lesson I learned after being reborn. The second lesson? The closer you are to a monster, the easier it is to see the blood beneath the disguise. For nearly a year, I did nothing. At least, that's what everyone thought. I played with dolls, I watched cartoons, I laughed at family dinners, I acted exactly like a normal 8-year-old girl. Meanwhile, I was building a file inside my head, a file on Victor Hale. His habits, his routines, his weaknesses. Every morning, he woke up at precisely 5:30. Every Wednesday evening, he disappeared for 2 hours without explanation. Every month, he received a sealed envelope from an unknown sender. Every time his phone displayed a certain number, he left the room immediately. Small details, meaningless by themselves, dangerous when combined. And the more I watched, the more I realized something interesting. Victor wasn't as confident as he appeared. He was afraid, terrified actually, of what? I didn't know yet. But fear leaves clues. And I intended to follow everyone. Before I could destroy Victor's life, I needed to understand the people protecting it. That meant studying his family. Starting with my mother, Amelia Hale. She was kind, too kind. The type of woman who believed everyone deserved a second chance. The type of woman who saw goodness even where none existed. Victor knew that. He used it, every compliment, every gift, every act of affection, carefully calculated, carefully designed. He wasn't loving her, he was managing her, controlling her, keeping her loyal. The realization made me sick, because she genuinely loved him, and she had no idea what he really was. Then there was Ethan, the oldest child, 15 years old. Athletic. Popular. Disciplined. At first glance, he seemed like Victor's perfect son, but appearances can be deceiving. Ethan hated his father, not openly, not enough to start a fight, but enough that I noticed. Every compliment from Victor made him uncomfortable, every family photo felt forced, every conversation felt rehearsed. Something had happened between them, something nobody talked about. And then there was Lily, Victor's daughter, 13 years old, quiet, intelligent, observant, far more observant than anyone realized, including Victor. The first time she caught me secretly watching him, she smiled, not because she thought it was funny, because she understood. Somehow, Lily already knew something was wrong. I wasn't the only one paying attention. That made her dangerous, or useful. I hadn't decided which. Yet, adults talk freely around children. It's one of humanity's strangest habits. They assume little ears don't understand. Victor certainly believed that. One afternoon, he invited several business associates to the house, important men, influential men, the kind who wore expensive watches and fake smiles. I sat quietly in the corner, coloring in a notebook, completely ignored, exactly where I wanted to be. The men laughed, shared drinks, discussed investments. Then one of them mentioned a name, Marcus Vance. The room immediately went silent. Victor's smile disappeared, only for a second, but I saw it. fear. Pure fear. Then he changed the subject, too quickly, too forcefully. The others followed his lead, and just like that, the conversation moved on, but not for me, because if a single name could make Victor Hale nervous, that name mattered a lot. That night, I wrote it down. Marcus Vance, the first real lead I'd discovered, and certainly not the last. A month later, I stumbled onto another secret.by accident, or maybe fate simply decided to help me. It happened during a family vacation. We were staying at a luxury lake house several hours from the city. The adults were downstairs entertaining guests. The children were supposed to be asleep. I wasn't. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my room. Heavy footsteps, Victor's footsteps. Curious, I followed, carefully, silently. He walked to a detached storage building behind the property, a place no one else ever entered. Then he unlocked the door and disappeared inside. The moment he left, I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. Then I sneaked outside. My heart hammered against my ribs. One mistake could expose everything. One mistake could get me killed. Again, when I reached the building, the door was slightly open, just enough for me to peek inside. What I saw changed everything. Boxes, dozens of them, locked metal containers, stacks of documents, several passports, different names, different identities, different photographs, and at the center of the room, a large safe. Whatever Victor was hiding. It wasn't small. It wasn't simple, and it definitely wasn't legal. Then I heard footsteps approaching. I barely escaped before he caught me. But from that moment forward, I knew one thing. Victor's entire new life was built on lies. The question was no longer whether I could destroy him. The question was how. A week later, Lily cornered me, not physically, emotionally. I was reading in the garden when she sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Why do you always watch Dad?" My blood froze. I forced a smile. "What do you mean?" She didn't smile back. "I see you." Those 3 words sent chills down my spine. I see you. Not many people had ever truly seen me. Not in my old life. Not in this one. But Lily did. And that was dangerous. Very dangerous. I considered lying. Instead, I asked a question. "Why do you watch him?" For a moment, she looked surprised. Then she laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because she had her answer. Neither of us trusted Victor. Neither of us knew why. But both of us felt it. The darkness beneath the surface, the monster behind the smile, and for the first time since my rebirth, I realized I might not be fighting alone. As months passed, the perfect family image began to fracture. Tiny cracks appeared everywhere. Victor and Ethan argued more frequently. Amelia seemed increasingly anxious. Lily became withdrawn. And Victor himself started drinking. Not enough for others to notice. Enough for me to notice. Fear was eating him alive. Whatever secret he was protecting was getting harder to contain. Then one evening, everything changed. A black envelope arrived in the mail.no return address.no sender, just Victor's name. I watched from the staircase. As he opened it, the moment he saw the contentious face turned white, not pale, white, like a man who had just seen a ghost. He immediately locked himself in his office for 6 hours. When he finally emerged, looked 10 years older, and for the first time since I'd known him he seemed vulnerable. That was when I understood. Someone else was hunting him. Someone who knew his secrets. Someone who frightened him even more than exposure. And if I could discover who that person was, he might finally have the weapon I needed. I had spent years pretending to be a harmless little girl, watching, listening, learning. Now, the pieces were finally starting to move. Victor was afraid. His family was unraveling. And somewhere in the shadow Sanather, enemy had entered the game. The only problem? I didn't know whether that enemy wanted to destroy Victor. Destroy everyone connected to him, including me. The name Marcus Vance haunted me. Every clue seemed to lead back to him. Every crack in Victor's perfect life, somehow connected to that single name. So I started digging, carefully, patiently, the way I had as Sophia Bennett, the journalist. Victor thought he'd buried forever. One afternoon, while everyone was out, I slipped into Victor's office. I only had a few minutes, maybe less. My heart pounded as I Searched through his desk drawers, tax records, business contracts, family documents. Nothing useful. Then I found a locked cabinet, and attached to the bottom of the desk a tiny key. The moment the cabinet opened, I knew I'd found something important. Inside was a folder, old, worn, hidden. The label read, Project Phoenix. My stomach dropped, because I recognized the name, Project Phoenix was the investigation I had been working on before my death, the investigation that led me to Victor, the investigation that got me killed, and somehow Victor had kept the evidence, not destroyed it, not burned it, kept it. As if he couldn't let go of the past, or maybe as if he needed a reminder of what he'd done. Then I heard footsteps. I barely managed to put everything back before Victor entered the room. For one terrifying second, our eyes met, and something strange happened. He stared at me, longer than usual, almost suspiciously. As if he sensed something, not who I was, but something, a feeling. An instinct. Then he smiled, and the moment passed. But a seed of doubt had been planted for both of us. The next black envelope arrived 2 weeks later. This time, I was ready. I watched from my bedroom window as the mail carrier delivered it. The second Victor saw it, he froze. Then he grabbed it before anyone else could. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I slipped into his office. I had noticed something earlier. Victor hadn't shredded the envelope. He'd hidden it inside the wastebasket, under several sheets of paper. Why? Because fear makes people careless, and Victor was becoming very afraid. I carefully retrieved the envelope. The contents were gone, but the inside flap contained a small marking, a symbol, a phoenix, the same symbol from the Project Phoenix folder. Coincidence? No, absolutely not. Someone connected to my old investigation was contacting Victor, someone who knew exactly how to frighten him, and suddenly, I had a terrifying thought. What if Marcus Vance wasn't Victor's enemy? What if Marcus Vance had once been his partner? Destroying a family isn't as simple as exposing secrets. You have to understand relationships, find pressure points, push carefully. Too much force too early, and everything collapses before you're ready. So I started small, very small. One evening, during dinner, Victor mentioned Ethan's future. Predictably, he wanted Ethan to join the family business. Ethan looked miserable. As always. Then I spoke. The table fell silent, which wasn't unusual. I rarely interrupted adult conversations. Maybe Ethan doesn't want to. Victor laughed, a forced laugh. What makes you say that? I shrugged. Because he never looks happy when you talk about it. The silence afterward was deafening. Amelia glanced at Ethan. Ethan looked away. Victor's smile tightened, and for the first time, conversation became uncomfortable. Not explosive, not dramatic, just uncomfortable. A tiny crack, a tiny domino. But even the tallest wall eventually falls brick by brick. A few days later, Lily approached me again. This time, she wasn't asking questions, she was offering information. I know Dad lies. Simple, direct, dangerous. I stared at her. She stared back. Neither of us blinked. Finally, she continued. I just don't know about what. I realized then that Lily wasn't naive. She wasn't imagining things. She had been collecting evidence to dot in her own way for years, and unlike Amelia and Ethan, she wasn't afraid of the truth. And no matter how ugly it might be, that made her valuable, very valuable. But trust was dangerous, especially for someone who had already been murdered once. So I said, nothing. Lily smiled slightly. You don't trust anyone, do you? I nearly laughed. If only she knew. The girl she was speaking to had literally died because she trusted the wrong person. No, I answered. I don't, and somehow that honesty brought us closer. The breakthrough came 6 months later. I was browsing old newspaper archives online when I found it. A photograph, 20 years old, blurry, poor quality, but unmistakable. There were 3 men standing together. One was Victor, much younger, much poorer. The second was Marcus Vance, and the third made my blood run cold, because I recognized him instantly. Detective Charles Everett, the lead detective assigned to my murder case. The same detective who declared there wasn't enough evidence. The same detective who closed the investigation. The same detective who protected Victor. Suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't a single killer. It never had been. It was a network, a machine, a system built on corruption. Victor wasn't just a murderer. He was part of something bigger, something that had survived for decades. And so Maui had stumbled directly into its center. The storage building haunted me, especially the safe. Whatever was inside had to be important. Important enough for Victor to hide it from everyone. Important enough to risk getting caught. So I began studying him even more closely. Watching how he entered the code. Watching where his eyes moved. Watching which fingers he used. Months passed. Slowly, the puzzle came together. Then one rainy evening, opportunity arrived. Victor left unexpectedly. The house was empty, and for the first time, the safe was unguarded. My hands trembled as I entered the building. The code worked. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, passports, documents, photographs, and one file. A file labeled Bennett, my old surname, my old life, my old identity. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Victor had kept records about me, about everything. The investigation, the surveillance, the murder, the cover-up. I flipped through page after page, every horrible truth confirmed, and then I found something worse. Much worse. At the very end of the file was a photograph, taken recently, not years ago. Recently. It showed Amelia, my mother, Victor's wife. Someone was watching her, following her, tracking her movements, meaning one thing: Victor's enemies weren't coming for him anymore. They were coming for his family. The next clue arrived unexpectedly: a charity gala. One of Victor's favorite public events, the perfect place to showcase his perfect image. I attended with the family, dressed in an expensive little dress, smiling for photographs, playing the role of the happy stepdaughter. Then I saw her, a woman in a red gown, elegant, confident, dangerous. The moment she entered the room, Victor's expression changed. Not fear, not anger, panic, pure panic. The woman noticed, and smiled, not warmly. Predator. I lied. As if she knew exactly what effect she had. Then she walked past him and whispered something, just a few words, but whatever she said nearly made Victor drop his glass. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't need to. The reaction told me everything. This woman knew his secrets, maybe all of them, and somehow, I had to find out who she was. That night, Victor locked himself in his office again. Amelia cried herself to sleep. Ethan left the house angry. Lily secretly followed Victor's movements. And I sat alone in my room, staring at the evidence I'd collected. Years of patience, years of observation, years of planning. The game was changing. The board was shifting. New players were emerging. And for the first time since my rebirth, I wasn't sure who the real enemy was anymore. Victor, Marcus Vance, the detective, the woman in red, or the powerful organization hiding behind all of them. One thing was certain. My revenge was no longer personal. It had become something much bigger, something far more dangerous, and once I took the next step, there would be no turning back. I thought I was infiltrating a killer's family. I was wrong. I had infiltrated a war, a secret war that had been raging for decades, a war built on lies, power, money, and murder, and soon he would discover the one secret Victor feared more than death itself. For 2 weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about the woman in red. Who was she? Why was Victor terrified of her? And why did she seem so confident? Most people feared Victor Hale. She didn't. She looked at him the way a hunter looks at wounded prey. And that made her dangerous, very dangerous. So I began watching Victor more closely than ever. The changes were immediate. He stopped sleeping properly. He became short-tempered, paranoid, distracted. Several times I caught him checking the windows, checking security cameras, checking locks. The man who once appeared untouchable now looked hunted. Then, one evening, everything changed. I overheard a phone call. Victor was in his office. His voice was low, tense, angry. You should have stayed gone. A pause. Then no. We finished this years ago. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, genuine fear entered his voice. If you tell them, we're all dead. Then the call ended. I froze. We're all dead. Not just Victor, everyone involved. Meaning whatever secret he was protecting could destroy far more than his reputation. It could destroy an entire network. And the woman in red apparently knew exactly where the bodies were buried, possibly literally. Old habits never die, even after death. Especially after death. In my previous life, I had been a journalist. Now, trapped in the body of a child, I became one again. I started collecting information systematically: names, dates, locations, patterns, everything. I created a hidden notebook beneath a loose floorboard in my room. A secret archive, just like the one I kept before Victor murdered me. Every piece of information went inside: the black envelopes, Marcus Vance, the detective, the storage building, the safe, the mysterious woman. For months, the notebook grew thicker. And the picture became clearer. Victor wasn't the mastermind. That realization surprised me. He was important, powerful, dangerous, but not the leader. Someone else sat above him. Someone wealthy enough to stay invisible. Someone powerful enough to make investigations disappear. Someone Victor feared. The question was, who? The first member of the family to crack was Ethan. I wasn't expecting it, but pressure changes people. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the garage. His eyes were red, his fists clenched, the kind of look people get when they've spent years swallowing their anger. I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then he surprised me. "Do you think Dad lies?" I nearly stopped breathing. This wasn't a child asking another child a random question. This was a son asking a question he'd been carrying for years. I considered my answer carefully. "Why would you ask that?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Because every time I ask him something important, he changes the subject." Silence. Then, sometimes I think he doesn't even know how to tell the truth. I looked at him. Really looked at him, and suddenly I understood. Ethan wasn't afraid of Victor. He was disappointed in him, and disappointment cuts deeper than fear, because disappointment means love existed first. 3 months later, I finally discovered why Victor kept my file. The answer came from an unexpected source: Marcus Vance. Not directly, but close enough. A hidden document buried inside the safe revealed everything. At least, everything Victor knew. Years ago, before my death, I had uncovered evidence linked to Project Phoenix. Evidence proving that several influential people were involved in organized corruption: politicians, business executives, police officials, judges. The investigation was explosive, but Victor discovered something before I did, something that terrified him. I wasn't the only person investigating. Someone else was feeding me information. Someone inside the organization. An informant, a traitor, and Victor never learned who it was. Even after my murder, even after my death, the informant vanished, disappeared completely. Which meant Victor had spent years wondering if someone was still out there, watching, waiting, planning, and that explained everything. The paranoia, the fear, the black envelopes, the woman in red. Victor wasn't afraid of exposure. He was afraid of unfinished business. The answer finally arrived one rainy afternoon. I was leaving school when a black car pulled up beside me, the tinted window lowered, and there she was, the woman in red. Though today she wore black, she looked directly at me, not at the road, not at the crowd, at me. My blood turned cold, because her eyes told me something terrifying. She knew who I was, or at least, she knew I wasn't an ordinary child. "Get in." The words were calm, confident, terrifying. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity won. It always did. Curiosity got Sophia Bennett killed, and apparently, I hadn't learned my lesson. I got into the car. The woman smiled. "You're braver than I expected." I said nothing. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she finally introduced herself. "My name is Cassandra Reed." The name meant nothing. At first. Then she handed me a photograph. An old photograph. A photograph of Sophia Bennett, my old self. I nearly dropped it. Cassandra watched my reaction carefully, and then she said 6 words that changed everything. "I know what Victor did." For the next hour, Cassandra talked, and I listened. Apparently, she had spent years investigating Project Phoenix, years tracking corruption, years hunting the people responsible, including Victor, including Marcus Vance, including the hidden leaders above them. But then she said something impossible, something that shattered everything I thought I knew. Sophia Bennett wasn't supposed to die. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Cassandra looked out the window. "The order wasn't to kill her." Suddenly the air felt thin, hard to breathe, hard to think. "What?" "The organization wanted intimidation, surveillance, control." She paused. "Victor made the decision himself." The words hit me harder than my actual death, because until that moment, I'd always imagined Victor acting under orders, following instructions, being a weapon. But no, he chose it. He chose to kill me. Not because he had to, because he wanted to, because it was easier, because my life meant nothing to him. For the second time in my existence, Victor Hale murdered me, the first time physically, the second time emotionally. That night, I made a decision. Observation was over, waiting was over, planning was over. It was time to attack, carefully, strategically. But attack nonetheless. The opportunity arrived faster than expected. Victor was preparing for a major charity fundraiser, hundreds of guests, media coverage, sponsors, investors, a perfect opportunity to reinforce his image, which made it the perfect opportunity to damage it. Using information I'd collected for years, I anonymously leaked evidence of financial irregularities to a local journalist. Nothing illegal, not yet, just enough to raise questions, just enough to attract attention, just enough to make people curious. The article appeared 3 days before the event. Questions spread rapidly, nothing devastating, but enough to make Victor nervous, enough to make investors uncomfortable, enough to create doubt, and doubt is powerful, because reputations aren't destroyed by facts. They're destroyed by uncertainty. The fundraiser was a disaster, not publicly. Publicly, everything appeared normal, but privately, Victor was furious. I could see it in his eyes. In the way he moved. In the way he barked orders. Someone had attacked him. And for the first time in years, he didn't know who. That uncertainty was driving him insane. Then something happened that genuinely frightened me. At dinner, Victor suddenly looked directly at me, not casually, not affectionately, directly, studying me, evaluating me. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Then he smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "You've changed." The words sounded innocent, but they weren't, not even close. My heart pounded. I forced a childish laugh. "What do you mean?" Victor leaned back in his chair, still watching me, still analyzing me. And for the first time since my rebirth, he felt real danger, because somewhere deep inside his instincts, Victor Hale was beginning to recognize the ghost of the woman he murdered. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because I was excited, terrified, but excited. For years, I'd been hiding, watching, waiting. Now the game had finally begun. Victor was suspicious. Cassandra had entered the battlefield. The organization was stirring. Secrets were emerging. And somewhere in the shadows, the mysterious informant who once helped Sophia Bennett might still be alive. The pieces were moving. The board was changing. The war had officially started, and neither side could walk away anymore. Victor thought he buried Sophia Bennett. He thought he silenced her forever. But the dead have a habit of returning, and this time I wasn't coming back as a journalist. I was coming back as his daughter, his nightmare, his punishment, and soon he would uncover the one secret capable of bringing down everyone connected to Project Phoenix. After the fundraiser, Victor changed, not publicly. Publicly, he remained the same charming businessman everyone adored, the smiling husband, the devoted father, the respected philanthropist. But inside the house, the mask was slipping. And I was the first to notice. His eyes lingered on me longer than before. His questions became more specific, more personal, more probing, almost as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. One evening, while helping Amelia set the table, Victor suddenly appeared behind me. I nearly jumped. "You remind me of someone." My blood froze. The plate nearly slipped from my hands. I forced myself to smile. "Who?" Victor stared at me, long enough to make my skin crawl. Then he shook his head. "No one." But I knew better, and judging from the tension in his face, so did he. 3 days later, Cassandra contacted me again. This time, she was far more careful. No phone calls, no meetings. Instead, she left a message hidden inside a book at the public library. A spy tactic, old-fashioned, effective. Inside was a note, just 6 words. "The informant is still alive." I read the sentence 3 times, then 10, then 20. My hands trembled, because if that was true, it changed everything. The mysterious source who had fed information to Sophia Bennett years ago wasn't dead, wasn't missing, wasn't gone. They were still out there, still hiding, still watching, still fighting. The question was, who? And why hadn't they revealed themselves? The first person to officially join my side was Lily, not because I recruited her, because she made her own choice. One afternoon, she walked into my room without knocking, closed the door, locked it, then dropped a folder onto my desk. I stared at it. "So?" She folded her arms. "Aren't you going to open it?" Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Victor meeting strangers, Victor entering buildings, Victor receiving packages, Victor speaking with people he'd never mentioned. My eyes widened. Lily smiled, a rare smile, a dangerous smile. I've been following him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then realization hit me. She had been investigating him too, for years, on her own, without anyone knowing. The daughter Victor trusted most had secretly become his shadow, and now she was offering me everything she'd collected. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I trusted someone. Just a little. If Lily was observant, Ethan was explosive, and eventually, explosions become impossible to ignore. I discovered his secret entirely by accident. One night, I overheard an argument between him and Victor, a real argument, not their usual tension. This was war. I know you're lying, Ethan shouted. Victor's voice turned cold. You don't know anything. Then tell me where she went. Silence. A long silence, the kind that reveals more than words. Then Ethan spoke again. This time his voice cracked. Mom deserves the truth. Mom? At first, I thought he meant Amelia. Then I realized something. Amelia wasn't Ethan's biological mother. Victor had been married before. A woman nobody ever talked about. A woman who had seemingly vanished. The argument continued. But I had already heard enough. Victor's first wife wasn't gone. She was another secret, another mystery, another crack in the foundation. And somehow, Ethan had spent years trying to uncover it. A week later, Cassandra delivered another piece of information. This time, it was devastating. A hidden document from Project Phoenix.N internal report. One name was highlighted repeatedly. Elena Hale, Victor's first wife. My heart raced, because beside her name was a single word: liability. Not spouse, not family, not witness. Liability. The language of criminals. The language of people who remove problems. Suddenly, Ethan's questions made perfect sense. His mother hadn't left. Something had happened to her. Something Victor had spent years hiding. And if that was true, then I wasn't his first victim. Not even close. The breakthrough came on a stormy night. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder shook the house. Everyone was asleep. At least, they were supposed to be. Around midnight, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. One sentence. Sophia Bennett was my daughter. I stopped breathing. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Meet me alone. I knew it could be a trap. It probably was. But I couldn't ignore it. Not after everything. Not after years of questions. The meeting took place the following evening. An abandoned church outside the city. The kind of place nobody visited anymore. The kind of place where secrets felt at home. When I entered, an elderly man was waiting. Gray hair, tired eyes, worn suit. He looked ordinary, but his expression wasn't. His expression carried years of grief, years of guilt, years of regret. And the moment I saw him, I recognized him, not from this life, from my old one, my father. Tears filled his eyes immediately. Not because he recognized me, he couldn't, but because I reminded him of someone. I failed her. His voice broke. The words shattered something inside me, because for years, I'd blamed everyone. The police, the system, Victor, but never him. He wasn't responsible. He was a victim too. The old man explained everything. He had been the informant, the secret source, feeding information to Sophia Bennett, his own daughter. Together, they had been exposing Project Phoenix. Together, they had been gathering evidence. Then Victor discovered the investigation. Everything fell apart. After my death, my father went into hiding. Not because he was afraid for himself, because he knew the organization would kill anyone connected to Sophia Bennett, including him, including anyone he loved, including me, if they ever discovered the truth. Before leaving, my father handed me a flash drive. Small, ordinary, potentially deadly. This is everything. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? His expression darkened. Names. A pause. Accounts. Another pause. Evidence. Then finally, and the identity of the founder, the invisible figure controlling everything, the person even Victor feared, the person behind Project Phoenix, the person responsible for decades of corruption. I suddenly understood why my father had stayed hidden, why Cassandra was risking her life, why Victor was terrified. This wasn't just evidence. It was a death sentence for whoever possessed it, including me. The following week, Victor made his move. Not openly, not violently, Strategically, he hired a private security team, installed additional cameras, restricted access to parts of the house, monitored everyone's movements, especially mine. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew something was wrong. And his instincts were screaming at him. The hunter had finally realized he was being hunted. One evening, I caught him staring at an old photograph, a photograph of Sophia Bennett, my photograph, the image from years ago, the image he'd kept hidden. His fingers trembled slightly, his face looked haunted. Then he whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "I'm sorry." The words shocked me, not because they fixed anything, nothing could, but because they proved something important. Victor regretted it. Not enough to confess, not enough to surrender, not enough to face justice, but enough to be haunted, enough to suffer, and suffering was the beginning of destruction. Just when things seemed to be going our way, everything collapsed. Cassandra disappeared. No calls, no messages, no trace. Gone. Then Lily's surveillance folder vanished. Every photograph, every note, every piece of evidence gone. And finally, someone broke into my room. Not to steal valuables, not to search for money. To find information. The notebook beneath the floorboard had been disturbed. Not taken, but discovered, which meant one thing. Someone inside the house was working against us. Someone we trusted. Someone who knew we were investigating. Someone who had betrayed us. And for the first time since my rebirth, I genuinely didn't know who it was. That night, I plugged in the flash drive. The file opened. Thousands of documents appeared, photographs, transactions, confidential reports. Names. So many names, politicians, judges, business leaders, police officials. The corruption reached everywhere. But one document stood out, one document that made my blood run cold, because the founder of Project Phoenix wasn't a stranger, wasn't a politician, wasn't a billionaire. It was someone already inside our lives, someone we saw regularly, someone nobody suspected, someone whose face I knew. And when I read the name, I realized the war was about to become far more personal than anyone imagined. I had finally found the evidence, finally found the informant, finally found the truth. But the closer I came to destroying Project Phoenix, the more dangerous everything became. Because now there was a traitor among us. Cassandra was missing, Victor was fighting back, and the identity of Project Phoenix's founder had the power to destroy every life connected to it, including mine. I stared at the document, read it once, twice, 3 times. Surely I was mistaken. Surely there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, some missing piece. But the name didn't change. The founder of Project Phoenix was Judge Harold Whitmore, the same Judge Whitmore who appeared on television every week talking about justice. The same Judge Whitmore who attended Victor's charity events. The same Judge Whitmore who sat at our dinner table 3 times a year. The same man who always smiled kindly at children. The same man Amelia called a family friend. The same man who had known Victor for over 20 years. My stomach twisted, because suddenly everything made sense. Why investigations vanished, why court cases disappeared, why witnesses changed their stories, why evidence never reached trial. The system wasn't failing, the system had been designed that way. And Judge Whitmore had built it. For days I searched for the traitor. Who had entered my room? Who had discovered the notebook? Who had stolen Lily's evidence? I suspected everyone, even Lily, even Ethan. Trust was dangerous. Trust got people killed. Then the answer arrived unexpectedly. One evening, Lily burst into my room, pale, shaking, terrified. "Someone's been following me." Every instinct went on alert. What happened? She locked the door, then showed me a photograph of herself leaving school, taken from a distance. The back contained a handwritten message: "Stop digging." Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning. Whoever was watching us knew Lily was investigating, and that meant our enemy was much closer than we thought. Then Lily said something that chilled me. "I think I know who took the folder." My pulse quickened. Who? She swallowed hard. The housekeeper. Her name was Martha. She had worked for Victor for nearly 15 years, longer than Amelia, longer than Lily, longer than Ethan. Everyone trusted her, which was exactly why nobody noticed her. She cleaned, cooked, organized, listened, observed, invisible. The perfect spy, the perfect informant, the perfect traitor. That night, Lily and I watched from the hallway as Martha entered Victor's office. She wasn't cleaning. She wasn't delivering food. She wasn't working. She was reporting. For 20 minutes they talked. when she finally left, Victor handed her an envelope, money, payment, proof. Martha wasn't working for Victor, she belonged to him, and she'd been watching all of us for years. The answer arrived inside another black envelope, this time addressed to me. No one saw it arrive. No one knew it existed. Inside was a single photograph. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Cassandra, bound to a chair, bruised, exhausted, alive. A second photograph showed the date. Today's date, meaning the picture was recent, very recent. Then I turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 6 words. The next one is your father. My blood ran cold. The message was clear. The organization knew. They knew about Cassandra. They knew about my father. And sooner or later, they would know about me. The clock had started, and every second mattered. The truth about Ethan's mother came from the least likely source, Victor himself. A rare mistake, a rare moment of weakness. One night, after too much alcohol, Victor wandered into the garden alone. I followed, carefully, silently. He sat on a bench, staring into darkness, talking to himself, or perhaps talking to ghosts. Then I heard a name, Elena, his first wife, Ethan's mother. Victor's voice cracked. I never wanted it to happen. My heart stopped, not because I believed him, because of what those words implied. Something had happened, something irreversible. Then he continued, you shouldn't have found out. Found out what? I desperately wanted answers. But Victor said no more. Instead, he buried his face in his hands, and for the first time I saw genuine pain, not fear, not manipulation, pain. Whatever happened to Elena. It haunted him. Even now, 3 weeks later, Lily discovered something extraordinary. A hidden room, not inside the mansion. Beneath it, the entrance was concealed behind shelving in an unused storage area, a place nobody ever entered, a place nobody was supposed to find. Inside were decades of records, photographs, files, audio recordings, surveillance reports, Project Phoenix archives, enough evidence to destroy hundreds of people, and among them, we found Elena's file. The truth hit us like a truck. Elena hadn't disappeared. She hadn't abandoned Ethan. She hadn't run away. She had discovered Project Phoenix. And when she threatened to expose it, Judge Whitmore ordered her elimination. Not Victor Whitmore. Victor had tried to protect her, failed, and spent the next 15 years living with the consequences. For several minutes, none of us spoke, because for the first time, Victor wasn't just a villain. He was also a coward, a man who watched evil happen and did nothing. A man who chose survival over love. For years, I had imagined Victor as the final boss, the ultimate enemy, the man responsible for everything. I was wrong. Victor wasn't the king. He was a knight, powerful, dangerous, replaceable. Judge Whitmore was the king, the architect, the creator, the man who built Project Phoenix, the man who ordered murders, destroyed families, controlled politicians, bought judges, owned police departments, and somehow he had remained untouchable for 30 years. That realization terrified me, because if Whitmore discovered what we knew none of us would survive, not Lily, not Ethan, not my father, not Cassandra, not even Victor. Especially not Victor. The following week, Victor did something unexpected. He approached me directly. No games. No smiles. No pretending. Just honesty, or at least something close to it. I know someone's investigating me. The words hit like a hammer. I forced myself to remain calm. I'm just a kid. Victor stared at me, long and hard. Then he nodded. That's what scares me. For several seconds, silence filled the room. Then he said something shocking. If you ever find yourself in danger, pause. A deep breath. Come to me. I nearly laughed. Come to my killer for protection? The irony was almost unbearable. Yet something in his expression seemed genuine. Not trustworthy, not innocent, but genuine. Victor knew something was coming, and he was afraid. Very afraid. 2 nights later, all hell broke loose. Martha disappeared. Gone. No warning. No explanation. No trace. Then Judge Whitmore vanished from public view. Every scheduled appearance canceled, every meeting postponed, every event abandoned. The king had left the board. And kings only run when war is coming. Then my father called. His voice was shaking. Someone's following me. The fear in his voice was real, raw, immediate, and suddenly I understood. Whitmore knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to start cleaning house. Enough to remove witnesses, enough to silence threats, enough to kill. Again, that night, Ethan arrived at my room carrying a file. His face looked pale, older somehow, like he'd aged years in a single day. Without speaking, he handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was a photograph, an old one, taken shortly before Sophia Bennett's death, my death. The photograph showed me meeting someone in secret, someone I had completely forgotten, someone from my previous life, someone standing beside my father, someone helping our investigation. And when I saw the everything finally clicked, the informant, the leaks, the black envelopes, the warnings, the mysterious woman in red, the hidden evidence, the person orchestrating everything from the shadows. It had been the same person all along. Someone I'd trusted, someone I'd known, someone still alive, and someone who was now preparing for the final battle against Project Phoenix. The truth was finally coming together. Judge Whitmore had built the empire. Victor had helped protect it. Elena died because she discovered it. Cassandra had been captured, and now the war was entering its final stage. But the biggest revelation was still waiting, because the person leading the fight against Project Phoenix wasn't a stranger. It was someone connected to Sophia Bennett's past. Someone who had spent years preparing for revenge, and when they finally stepped into the light, everything would change. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. The woman standing beside my father looked familiar, painfully familiar. A memory buried deep inside my old life suddenly resurfaced. Her name was Rachel Monroe, my former editor, my mentor, the woman who taught me investigative journalism, the woman who encouraged me to pursue Project Phoenix when everyone else told me to walk away, the woman I trusted, the woman I thought had disappeared after my death. She hadn't disappeared. She'd gone underground for 15 years, preparing, planning, waiting, and somehow she had become the unseen force behind everything. The black envelopes, the leaked information, the warnings, the pressure campaign against Victor, the investigation into Whitmore. Rachel had never stopped fighting, not even after Sophia Bennett died. 2 days later, I finally met Rachel. The meeting took place in an abandoned train station outside the city. The moment I saw her, my chest tightened. She looked older, tired, weathered by years of war, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp, focused, determined. The eyes of someone who refused to surrender. She looked at me carefully, almost strangely. Then she smiled. You remind me of her. The words nearly broke me. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say, Rachel, it's me. I'm Sophia. I survived. Not exactly, but somehow. Instead, I remained silent, because even I wasn't sure how such a truth could possibly be explained. Rachel opened a briefcase. Inside were photographs, documents, financial records, years of evidence. This is everything we've gathered. I stared in amazement. The amount of information was staggering. Project Phoenix wasn't just corrupt, it was monstrous. The evidence linked dozens of powerful people to crimes spanning decades. Fraud, blackmail, witness, intimidation, disappearances, and worse, much worse. Rachel looked directly at me. We only get one chance. I nodded, because she was right. One mistake would destroy everything. 3 nights later, the impossible happened. Cassandra escaped. Barely. A heavily injured Cassandra appeared at one of Rachel's safe houses shortly after midnight. Bruised, exhausted, bleeding, but alive. When Rachel called me, I arrived immediately. The moment Cassandra saw me, she smiled weakly. You look terrible. I laughed despite everything. Then Cassandra became serious, very serious. They know. The room fell silent. How much do they know? Rachel asked. Cassandra's expression darkened. Enough. A pause. Then, Whitmore knows someone inside Victor's family is helping the investigation. My heart sank, because that narrowed the suspect list dramatically. And if Whitmore kept digging, eventually he would find me. Some truths destroy people, others set them free. The truth about Elena did both. Rachel believed Ethan deserved to know. I agreed. Victor disagreed, strongly. But for once, nobody listened to Victor. The meeting happened in private. Just Ethan, Rachel, and me. Rachel handed him Elena's file. Then she left him alone for nearly 2 hours. When Ethan finally emerged, his eyes were red, his face looked hollow, broken. But beneath the grief something else existed. Relief, because after 15 years she finally knew. His mother hadn't abandoned him. She hadn't chosen to leave. She had loved him, fought for him, risked everything for him, and died because she refused to stay silent. Ethan cried that night, harder than I'd ever seen anyone cry then. Sometime before sunrise tears stopped, and the anger began. Victor and Ethan's confrontation shook the entire house. Years of pain exploded at once. Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan shouted. Victor looked exhausted, defeated, older than I'd ever seen him. "I was trying to protect you." The answer only made things worse. "Protect me from what?" Victor's voice cracked. "From becoming me." Silence, heavy silence. Then Victor said something none of us expected. "If I had fought harder, she'd still be alive." For a moment, nobody spoke, because there was no defense against that truth. No excuse, no justification. Victor had failed Elena, not because he killed her, because he let her die, and he'd spent 15 years punishing himself for it. The attack came at dawn, not against us, against Rachel. One of her safe houses exploded. Thankfully, nobody was inside, but the message was clear. Whitmore knew where to strike, and he was escalating, fast. Within 48 hours, 3 witnesses disappeared, 2 investigators quit, 1 journalist publicly retracted an article. Fear spread everywhere. Project Phoenix was fighting back, and unlike us, they had unlimited resources, unlimited influence, unlimited reach. Rachel gathered everyone that evening. The atmosphere was grim. "We're out of time." Nobody argued, because everyone knew she was right. Just when things seemed hopeless, Lily made a discovery, a huge discovery. While searching through the hidden room beneath the mansion, she found an old audio recorder, dust-covered, forgotten, ignored. Inside was a recording dated 16 years earlier, the day Elena died. My hands trembled as we played it. Voices filled the room. Whitmore, Victor, Elena. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then Elena's voice became clear, strong, fearless, defiant. "You can threaten me all you want." A pause. "I won't help you cover this up." Then Whitmore spoke, cold, calm, terrifying. "If you leave this room alive, everything we've built dies." The recording ended shortly afterward, but we had enough, more than enough. For the first time we possessed direct evidence, evidence linking Whitmore to murder. Evidence that could destroy him, evidence worth killing for. That night, Victor approached Rachel alone. No one heard the full conversation, but later Rachel told us what happened. Victor offered to testify, against Whitmore, against Project Phoenix, against everyone. In exchange for one thing, protection for his family. Not himself, his family. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who once murdered to protect himself was now willing to sacrifice everything to protect others, especially Ethan, especially Lily, especially Amelia, and strangely especially me. Rachel accepted, but warned him, "Once this starts, there's no going back." Victor simply nodded. "I know." For the first time in years, Victor Hale had chosen a side. 3 nights later, Whitmore finally made his move. Personally, a black convoy arrived outside the mansion shortly before midnight. Security cameras went dark. Phone signals vanished. Power failed. The house fell into darkness. I woke to shouting, running footsteps, breaking glass. Then Victor burst into my room. Not calm, not composed, panicked. "Get up." My heart pounded. "What happened?" "We've been found." The words hit like a hammer. Whitmore wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't threatening anymore. He wasn't negotiating anymore. He was coming, and everyone knew exactly what that meant. We escaped through the hidden passage beneath the mansion, the same passage Elena once discovered, the same passage Project Phoenix had used for decades. Behind us, chaos erupted, sirens, shouting, gunfire in the distance. The war had finally become visible. No more secrets. No more shadows. No more hiding. As we emerged into the cold night air, I looked back. The mansion stood against the darkness, beautiful, perfect, a symbol of everything Victor had built and everything he was about to lose. Rachel gathered everyone together. Ethan, Lily, Amelia, Cassandra, Victor, my father, and me. Then she spoke 4 words. "The final battle begins." And for the first time since my murder, I believed we might actually win. The masks had fallen, the alliances were made, the evidence was secured, and the war was out in the open. But Judge Whitmore still held enormous power, enough power to destroy governments, enough power to erase identities, enough power to kill anyone who stood against him. The next battle would determine everything, and not everyone would survive it. By morning, every news channel in the country was reporting the same story. Victor Hale had vanished. Judge Harold Whitmore had vanished. Several prominent business executives had vanished, and nobody knew why. At least, that was the public version. Behind the scenes, chaos was spreading. Banks were freezing accounts, Government agencies were launching investigations, journalists were digging through decades of buried scandals, and Project Phoenix was beginning to fracture. The organization had survived for 30 years because nobody talked. Now everyone was terrified, and terrified people make mistakes, big mistakes. Rachel knew it, Cassandra knew it, even Victor knew it, which was why we moved constantly. New safe house every night. No phones. No social media. No contact with anyone outside our circle. Because Whitmore still had loyal followers, and loyal followers are often more dangerous than leaders, the decision shocked everyone, especially me. Victor wanted to confess, publicly, completely, not just to his role in Project Phoenix, everything. Including Sophia Bennett, including me, or at least the woman I used to be. Rachel thought he was insane. Cassandra thought it was suicide. My father looked physically ill, but Victor refused to change his mind. I started this. His voice sounded tired. Broken. I should have ended it years ago. Nobody argued, because nobody could. For the first time, Victor wasn't making excuses. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He was accepting responsibility, and somehow, that frightened him more than Whitmore ever had. Chapter 63. The broadcast 3 days later, Victor Hale appeared on live television. The entire country watched. Millions of people, maybe more. I sat beside Rachel in a safe house hundreds of miles away. My hands trembled. Victor looked older, thinner, like the weight of 15 years had finally settled on his shoulders. For several moments, he simply stared into the camera. Then he spoke, and the world changed. He confessed to corruption, fraud, cover-ups, witness intimidation, Project Phoenix. Everything, every secret, every lie, every crime. One by one, the nation watched in stunned silence. Then came the moment I never expected. Victor lowered his head and said my name, Sophia Bennett. My chest tightened. He described the investigation, the confrontation, the decision, his decision. No excuses. No justifications. No attempts to minimize what he'd done. Just truth, raw and ugly. When the broadcast ended, silence filled the room. Because we all understood something. Victor had just signed his own death warrant. Judge Whitmore responded within hours. His counterattack was immediate, brutal, relentless. He appeared on television surrounded by lawyers and government officials. He called Victor a liar, a criminal, a desperate man trying to save himself. Then he presented evidence. Or at least what looked like evidence. Forged documents, fabricated recordings, false testimony. Years of preparation suddenly became obvious. Whitmore had planned for this. For decades, he had contingency plans, backup plans, emergency plans, and all of them were activating at once. The public didn't know who to believe. Neither side looked innocent. Neither side looked trustworthy. The truth was becoming buried beneath confusion, exactly the way Whitmore wanted. Then tragedy struck. One of Rachel's investigators disappeared. 48 hours later, his body was found. The news spread rapidly. Shock, fear, panic. The war was no longer theoretical. And no longer political. And no longer hidden. People were dying. Real people, good people, people who believed the truth mattered. Rachel took the news harder than anyone. The investigator had worked with her for 10 years, a friend, a colleague, a brother in everything except blood. That night, I found her sitting alone. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked defeated. Maybe we're losing. The words shocked me. Because Rachel never sounded defeated. Never. I sat beside her, and after a long silence, I said, "Then let's make sure he didn't die for nothing." Rachel stared at me, then slowly nodded, and the fire returned to her eyes. The breakthrough came from Lily. Again. At this point, none of us were surprised. She had become one of our most valuable allies. The recording of Elena's final confrontation with Whitmore had been authenticated, verified, confirmed, impossible to dismiss. Rachel arranged for its release. The moment it became public, everything changed. News channels replayed it continuously. Experts analyzed it. Citizens debated it. Prosecutors launched investigations. And suddenly, Whitmore's carefully constructed narrative began collapsing. Because facts are stubborn things. And this fact was devastating. People could hear Elena's voice, hear Whitmore's threats, hear the truth. For the first time in decades, Project Phoenix was losing control of the story. Ethan changed after learning the truth. Not in a bad way, not exactly. He became focused, determined, dangerously determined. One evening, he approached Victor. The tension between them was almost unbearable. Years of anger hung in the air. Then Ethan spoke. "You don't get forgiveness." Victor lowered his eyes. "I know." But the word surprised everyone, including Victor. Ethan swallowed hard. "But I don't want to hate you forever." Silence. Then tears appeared in Victor's eyes. Real tears. The first I'd ever seen. Because Ethan wasn't offering forgiveness. He was offering something harder. A chance to earn it. And Victor understood exactly how precious that was. The flash drive from my father contained thousands of files. Most were important. One was catastrophic data and encrypted ledger. Project Phoenix's financial backbone. Every payment, every bribe, every hidden account, every transaction. 30 years of corruption. Documented, verified, undeniable. Rachel's team finally cracked the encryption. And once they did, the dominoes began falling. Fast. Politicians resigned. Executives vanished. Arrests started. International investigations opened. Foreign governments became involved. The organization wasn't just collapsing, it was imploding. And at the center of the explosion stood Judge Whitmore. Then Whitmore made his most desperate move. He found us. Again. The safe house came under attack shortly after midnight. Everything happened at once. Alarms, shouting, breaking windows, gunfire outside, panic everywhere. We ran. Through hallways, through emergency exits, through darkness, trying to escape, trying to survive. Then someone fell behind. Victor. Of course it was Victor. For a brief moment, our eyes met. And I knew exactly what he was doing. He was staying behind. Deliberately. To give the rest of us to meet. Slow them down. To create an opening. To protect the family he'd spent years failing. Go. He shouted. Ethan screamed for him. Amelia cried. Lily refused to move. But Victor didn't hesitate. For the first time in his life, he chose other people over himself. And then the door slammed shut between us. By sunrise, the world had changed again. Judge Whitmore was officially wanted. Federal investigations were underway. International warrants were being prepared. Project Phoenix was collapsing faster than anyone predicted. And Victor Hale was missing. Nobody knew if he was alive. Nobody knew if he was dead. Nobody knew if we'd ever see him again. As we watched the morning news, Ethan sat silently beside me. Neither of us spoke, because despite everything, despite the murder, despite the lies, despite the pain, Victor had become something neither of us expected. A man trying, however late, to do the right thing. And sometimes the hardest thing in the world is watching someone change after you've already decided who they are. And then the door slammed shut between us. Project Phoenix was burning. Whitmore was running. The evidence was spreading. The truth was winning. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Because Judge Whitmore still had one final card to play. One final secret. One final weapon capable of destroying everything we'd fought for. And somewhere in the darkness, Victor Hale's fate remained unknown. For 7 days, nobody heard from Victor Hale. 7 days. No sightings. No calls. No messages. Nothing. The authorities assumed he was dead. The media assumed he was dead. Even Ethan eventually stopped pretending otherwise. But I wasn't convinced. Something felt wrong. Victor had spent his entire life surviving impossible situations. The idea that he would simply disappear didn't sit right with me. Then, on the 8th day, Rachel received a package. No return address. No fingerprints. No note. Inside was a flash drive. Just one file. A video. We gathered around a laptop and pressed play. The image flickered. Then Victor appeared, bruised, exhausted, but alive. The room fell silent. Victor looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I made it out." Amelia burst into tears. Ethan covered his face. Lily simply stared. For several moments, nobody moved, because after everything, Victor Hale had survived. Again, the video continued. Victor's expression grew serious, more serious than we'd ever seen. "There are things I haven't told you." A pause, then, things even I was afraid to face. My stomach tightened, because I already knew. The worst secrets are always saved for last. Victor took a deep breath, then finally spoke. Judge Whitmore wasn't the one who started Project Phoenix. The room froze. Rachel nearly dropped her coffee. "What?" Victor continued. "Whitmore inherited it." Silence. Absolute silence. The words changed everything. Again. Because if Whitmore wasn't the founder, then someone worse existed. Someone older. Someone smarter. Someone who had remained invisible for decades. Someone nobody had ever suspected. The next file on the flash drive contained photographs. Hundreds of them. Old photographs. New photographs. Financial records. Private correspondence. Evidence, enough evidence to rewrite history. At the center of it all was one person, a woman, 82 years old, publicly respected, universally admired, a national icon, someone famous for charity work, someone who appeared on television constantly, someone celebrated as a humanitarian, someone nobody would ever suspect. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, Judge Whitmore's mother, the true founder of Project Phoenix, the architect, the original mastermind, the person who built the organization 40 years earlier. For several seconds, nobody spoke, because the revelation felt impossible. Then Rachel whispered, "Oh, my God," and for once, nobody disagreed. The deeper we dug, the worse it became. Eleanor Whitmore wasn't motivated by money. She already had money. She wasn't motivated by power. She already had power. She was motivated by control, the need to shape society according to her own vision. She believed powerful people should rule. She believed ordinary people existed to serve. She believed laws were tools, justice was a tool, people were tools, and anyone who opposed her became an obstacle. An obstacle to remove. For 40 years, she'd remained hidden, untouchable, invisible, while others carried out her orders. Judge Whitmore, Victor, countless others, all pieces on her board, all disposable, all replaceable. The realization horrified me, because it meant my murder had ultimately been approved by someone who had probably never even learned my name. The final revelation from Victor's video surprised everyone, including me. Years ago, shortly after my death, Victor had tried to leave Project Phoenix, not because he'd suddenly become a good person, not because he'd developed a conscience, because he'd become afraid. Afraid of what he'd done, afraid of what he was becoming, afraid of himself. But Eleanor Whitmore refused. Nobody left Project Phoenix, nobody. Victor was given a choice, stay or lose everything, his wealth, his freedom, his family, his life. So he stayed. Cowardly? Absolutely, but also human. For the first time since my murder, I saw the complete picture, not a monster, not a victim, a flawed man who made terrible choices, and then spent years drowning in them. The authorities moved quickly, faster than anyone expected. Search warrants, financial seizures, arrests, raids, everything happened simultaneously. But Eleanor Whitmore vanished. Of course she did. Someone that powerful always has escape plans, private planes, safe houses, false identities, backup networks. The hunt spread internationally. Governments became involved, agencies coordinated, resources poured in, yet Eleanor remained invisible, almost like a ghost. The woman who had spent 40 years controlling others was now hiding from everyone. But Rachel wasn't worried, because Eleanor had one weakness: pride. And proud people always make mistakes. Several days later, I received a message, not from Rachel, not from Cassandra, not from my father, from Victor, a secure location, a meeting request. Against everyone's advice I went. Some questions need answers, some wounds need closure. Victor waited alone. Older, thinner, tired. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he looked directly at me, and something strange happened. A look of recognition crossed his face, not certainty. Recognition. As if he finally understood something impossible, something his instincts had been whispering for years. "You remind me of her." My chest tightened. Sophia Bennett, the woman he'd killed, the ghost he'd spent years running from, the ghost standing in front of him now, even if he didn't fully understand it. Then Victor said something unexpected. "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded, because he shouldn't. Some actions are too permanent, too devastating, too final. But forgiveness wasn't the question anymore. The question was what came next. Rachel's plan was brilliant, dangerous, but brilliant, using leaked information. She created the illusion that a hidden backup server existed. A server containing evidence capable of exposing every surviving member of Project Phoenix. The information was false. The server didn't exist, but Eleanor didn't know that, and pride made her predictable. Within 48 hours, movement was detected. Communications activated. Old contacts resurfaced. Resources mobilized. Exactly as Rachel predicted, Eleanor took the bait, and for the first time in 40 years, the invisible woman became visible. The confrontation happened inside an abandoned estate outside the city. The irony wasn't lost on me. Powerful people always seem to gather in empty mansions. Rachel, Cassandra, my father, authorities, everyone was there. Everyone except me. At least initially. Then I arrived and saw Eleanor Whitmore for the first time. An elderly woman. Elegant, calm, composed. She didn't look like a monster. Most monsters don single quotes T.as authorities closed in. Eleanor simply smiled. Then she looked directly at Rachel. Do you really think this changes anything? Rachel didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. The evidence answered for her. The victims answered for her. The truth answered for her. And for the first time in decades, Eleanor Whitmore had nowhere left to run. As Eleanor was taken away, I expected to feel something: triumph, satisfaction, relief, joy. Instead, I felt tired, very tired, because revenge had consumed years of my life, 2 lives if I was being honest. Sophia Bennett spent her final years hunting the truth. My second life had been spent chasing justice. And now, the war was ending. The enemy was falling. The truth was winning. Yet my old life wasn't returning. My death wasn't being undone. Nothing could change the past. Then I finally understood something. Revenge isn't healing. Justice isn't healing. They're necessary, important. But healing is something else entirely. Something that comes afterward. Something much harder. Something called moving forward. Project Phoenix was broken. Eleanor Whitmore was captured. Judge Whitmore's empire had collapsed. The truth was finally free. But one final chapter remained. One final choice. One final goodbye. Because before this story could truly end, Sophia Bennett would have to decide who she wanted to be. The woman she was, or the girl she had become. The world felt strangely quiet. For years, every morning had begun with a mission. A clue to follow. A secret to uncover. A lie to expose. A move to anticipate. But now, Project Phoenix was gone. Its leaders were arrested. Its network was collapsing. Its victims were finally being heard. And for the first time in both my lives, there was no enemy waiting for me. No mystery. No battle. No war. Just silence. The kind of silence that arrives after a storm. The kind that feels uncomfortable because you've forgotten how to live without chaos. I stood outside the safe house watching the sunrise. The golden light spilled across the horizon. Beautiful, peaceful, normal. Things Sophia Bennett hadn't experienced in a very long time. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Victor, for several moments, neither of us spoke. The morning breeze moved through the trees. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. The world continued as if nothing had happened. As if entire lives hadn't been shattered and rebuilt. Victor stood beside me, older than before, not physically, spiritually, emotionally. The weight of his choices seemed visible now, like chains hanging from his shoulders. Finally, he spoke. They found enough evidence. I nodded. I know. The trials would begin soon. There was no escaping that. No deals. No loopholes. No hidden influence left to save him. Victor accepted it, perhaps for the first time in his life. Then he surprised me. I'm not afraid. That caught my attention. Because for years, fear had controlled him. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing power. Fear of consequences. Fear of the truth. Now it was gone. Not because he'd won. Because he'd stopped running. And somehow, that made him look more human than ever. The person who struggled most with everything wasn't Victor. It was Ethan. For weeks, he avoided everyone, including me, including Lily, including Amelia, even Victor, especially Victor. Then one afternoon, he finally broke the silence. The entire family gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, heavy, painful. Ethan looked directly at Victor, then spoke. I don't forgive you. Victor lowered his head. I know, but, again that word, that tiny word that changed everything. But I don't want your mistakes to become mine. Silence filled the room. Then Ethan continued, if I spend the rest of my life hating you, then you still control my future. Tears appeared in Amelia's eyes. Lily quietly looked away. Even Victor seemed stunned. Because Ethan had discovered something profound. Forgiveness isn't always about the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's about freeing yourself. And for the first time in years, Ethan looked free. If Ethan found peace, Lily found purpose. The investigation had changed her, strengthened her, sharpened her. One evening, she sat beside me on the porch, just the two of us, watching the sunset. You know, she said, I think I want to become a journalist. I laughed, a genuine laugh, perhaps the first genuine laugh I'd had in years. Why? She smiled. Because secrets make me angry. I stared at her, then laughed again, because she sounded exactly like Sophia Bennett, the original Sophia, the woman I used to be. Maybe that's why we'd understood each other so well, not because of fate, not because of destiny, because deep down, we were the same, curious, stubborn, relentless, and unwilling to look away from uncomfortable truths. The future suddenly looked very bright. For Lily, for Ethan, for all of us. The trials lasted months. The entire country watched. Every day brought new revelations, new witnesses, new evidence, new victims stepping forward. The scale of Project Phoenix shocked everyone. Corruption stretched further than anyone imagined. Lives had been ruined, families destroyed, truth buried, and now it was all coming into the light. Judge Harold Whitmore was convicted. Several former officials were convicted. Numerous executives accepted plea deals, others disappeared into prison. As for Eleanor Whitmore, the architect, the founder, the woman who started everything, her empire collapsed around her. Not because she grew weaker, because the truth finally grew stronger. And sometimes, that's enough. The day Victor was sentenced, rain fell from a gray sky. The courtroom was packed. Journalists crowded every seat. Cameras filled every corner. I watched quietly. Victor stood alone. No expensive lawyers. No arrogant speeches. No excuses. When asked if he wished to make a final statement, he simply nodded. Then he said, "I spent years convincing myself that survival justified everything." The courtroom fell silent. It doesn't. A pause. Then, "There are people I hurt who can never be made whole again." My throat tightened, because I was one of them, even if nobody else knew. Victor looked toward the gallery, toward Ethan, toward Lily, toward Amelia. Then finally, the truth arrived late, but it arrived. Those were his final words. The judge delivered the sentence, and Victor accepted it without resistance, without complaint, without fear. The man who once murdered to avoid consequences was finally facing them. 3 months later, a letter arrived, addressed to me. From Victor. I almost threw it away. Almost. Instead, I opened it. The letter wasn't long. It contained no requests, no excuses. No attempts at redemption. Just one paragraph, a simple paragraph. If there is any goodness left in me, it came from the people who refused to become monsters, even when I gave them every reason to. Thank you for helping save my family from becoming what I became. No signature. No dramatic farewell. Just honesty. For a long time, I stared at the page. Then I folded it carefully and placed it away. Not because I forgave him, because I didn't need to carry the anger anymore. Several weeks later, I visited a cemetery. A quiet place, a peaceful place, a place containing a grave. My grave, Sophia Bennett, beloved daughter, dedicated journalist, gone too soon. The words felt strange, because I wasn't gone. Not really. I stood there for a long time, remembering. The apartment, the investigation, the fear, the mistakes, the dreams, the death. Then I smiled, a small smile, a sad smile, but a real one, because Sophia Bennett's story had ended years ago, and she'd done enough, she'd fought enough, suffered enough, carried on. It was time to let her rest. Including the version of her living inside me, I gently placed flowers on the grave, then whispered, "Thank you," and finally walked away. For years, I'd thought of myself as Sophia, a dead woman trapped in a new life, a ghost wearing someone else's face. But standing beside that grave changed something. I wasn't Sophia anymore. Not entirely. I was also Emma Hale, a daughter, a sister, a survivor, a girl with her own future, her own dreams, her own life. For the first time since my rebirth, the future felt real. Not as a battlefield, but as a possibility. And that realization felt better than revenge ever had. 10 years later, the world looked different. Project Phoenix existed only in history books. Rachel published a best-selling book exposing the scandal. Cassandra became a nationally respected investigator. Ethan founded an organization helping families affected by corruption. Lily became an award-winning journalist, exactly as everyone predicted. Amelia found peace, the kind she'd spent years searching for. And me? I eventually followed a different path. Not journalism, not investigations, not revenge, something quieter, something happier, because I had already spent 2 lifetimes fighting darkness. I wanted to spend this one living in the light. Sometimes people ask if I believe in fate. If I believe my rebirth happened for a reason. Maybe, maybe not. What I do know is this. The man who murdered me gave me 2 choices. Spend my second life consumed by revenge, or use it to build something better. For a long time, I chose revenge. Eventually I chose life. And that made all the difference. Justice isn't always fast. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes it costs more than you think you can bear, but truth has a strange habit of surviving, even when buried, even when forgotten, even when someone tries to kill it. And perhaps that's the real lesson of this story. Not that evil loses, not that good always wins, but that one person telling the truth can start a fire powerful enough to illuminate the darkest corners of the world. My name was Sophia Bennett. My name is Emma Hale, and this was my second life.